In this video, I want to discuss the concept of grounding. Now, grounding can be defined as that feeling or action of connecting or rooting our leg to the ground as we move, which helps us keep more stable, more fluid, and more balanced. It also helps to improve our confidence as we move. Now, grounding as a concept is discussed frequently in disciplines like martial arts or dancing. In a martial art, grounding helps us to project power off of one leg and also helps keep us rooted so we don't get toppled over so easily by an opponent. In dancing, especially couples dancing, where a leader and a follower are dancing together, grounding not only helps with mobility and fluidity, it helps to define which leg is connected to the ground and which leg is going to be the swing leg so our dancers can move in a coordinated fashion without tripping over each other. So while grounding is important in martial arts and dancing and a lot of athletic activities, it is equally important in our everyday movement like walking. So that's why I wanted to talk to you today about the concept of grounding and how you can really do it better, because it's frequently referred to, but very rarely, if ever, described in terms of how it is actually done. That's what I'm going to help you with today. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Todd Martin, creator of the Walking Code. On this channel, I try to make videos that are going to help you get beyond just working on strengthening and stretching exercises and get into how we actually use our core to move more fluidly, more effectively, and with lower impact on our joints. Let's go ahead and get started. You can begin to think of the concept of grounding almost like a tether ball. A tether ball is going to be connected by a string to a pole, and whichever way you push the tether ball, it's going to move around the pole but never lose that connection to the pole. In our bodies, we can think of our leg as being tethered to the ground instead of the pole, and we are always going to be rooted or grounded on one leg at a time. And so if I am rooted on my right leg here, I'm going to move around this right leg as if I'm tethered to the ground, and that leg is not going to be easily unrooted from the ground unless I want to. And there's something that we are doing physically with our core that is keeping that rooting there. Another concept that is related to grounding is the concept of soft knees. You might have heard of this before. Not locking your knees out like this. We want to keep soft knees. The same action that is going to create grounding is going to create soft knees. So let's talk about what this action is. This action is movement coming from our lower abdominal muscles. And the lower abdominal muscles are going to ground or root one leg or the other leg. We have to think of the lower abs in two separate divisions because we have lower abs on the right side and lower abs on the left side, and they move in opposite directions. The lower abs on our right side rotate backward to the right. At the same time, they tuck our pelvis under. So one of the things they're going to be doing is rotating the pelvis around to the right if I'm activating my right lower abs, and they tuck the pelvis to keep it in a neutral position on the right. If you think about this, grounding requires some sort of force acting on the ground, connecting the leg to the ground. And that lower ab rotation and tucking is going to be that force. So as I'm rooting my right leg, my right lower abs are going to continually maintain a force rotating backwards towards the ground. And at the same time, tucking on that side. So if I were to move to the left while keeping the lower abs active on the right, the backward force of that rotation keeps the heel pressed down into the ground and prevents the leg from coming up. If from this position I were to take the right lower abs and deactivate them and turn the lower abs instead to the left, it's going to pull the right leg off the ground and change the root to the left. And then now I'm rooted on the left side. At the same time we're activating our lower abs, rooting either the right leg or the left leg, we're simultaneously using rotation of the upper waist muscles, primarily the external oblique. Our lower abs, we're talking about the internal obliques. We're rotating the upper abs in whatever way we want in connection with our lower abs. And the combination of the movement of our upper abs and lower abs, combined with whatever action we're doing with our hips, like flexing or extending, is going to create the ultimate movement that we're trying to do. But the rooting part is all going to be related to the lower ab action. I mentioned the soft knees. The tucking of the lower abs helps to soften the knees. If I have my knees locked out and practice this, lock your right knee out and then take your lower abs on the right and use them to tuck the pelvis under, and you see how it unlocks the knee on the right. And you really can't force the knee into a locked position as long as you have the lower abs there. The lower abs are going to maintain that soft knee and the connection to the ground at the same time. When we're walking, the important phase that we're going to go through that's going to connect the leg to the ground or root the leg is going to be after we place the heel on the ground. When I'm walking normally, as I take the swing through of the step, I'm rooted on the rear leg, on the left leg in this case, and then I'm going to place the heel down, and then after the heel placement, then I am going to use the lower abs to tuck under and root. So there's two things going on here as I take that step, placing on the heel. One is going to be the tucking of the pelvis that's going to bring my pelvis on the right side into a neutral position instead of being pitched like this, tucking the pelvis under like this. And the other thing is rotating back from the lower abs on the right. And essentially that is what is pulling against the ground, that backward rotation of the lower abs. If my arm was representing the lower abs, that's pulling against the ground as I move forward. And as soon as the full activation is there, now my right leg is fully rooted to the ground. And you'll notice as I do that transition, all of the rooting from the left side is taken away as the pelvis rotates and the tuck is changed from left to right. And by the time my forefoot hits the flat position, I now have no root on the left. When we move fluidly, there is a natural transition between the rooting of one leg and the rooting of the other leg. It's not an instantaneous action. As I place the heel here, I have 100% root on my left, no root on the right, which is why I can just pick the right up. As I change weight, I'm going to gradually release the root from the left and change it to the right. So at some point I have 100% root here, 0% root here. As I begin to turn to the right with the lower abs, now I have maybe 20% root here and 80% here. At some point I have 50-50, and then at some point I have 80-20, and then I have 100-0, and then the other leg is free to swing around and move. And if we're walking, that means it is free now to swing through in the swing phase of gait. Now I want to talk about some common problems that people have with grounding and why they are unable to keep proper grounding. And one of those is going to be having an anterior pelvic tilt. So instead of the pelvis being in a neutral tilt, it is tipped forward like this. That anterior pelvic tilt means that there is no action coming from the lower abs to keep the pelvis in this neutral position. And as I said, the lower abs are what's creating the rooting. So when people have an anterior pelvic tilt, usually with an exaggerated arch in the lower back, they're never really rooted to the ground. And so it's very easy to be off balance and unstable. And it also is going to cause increased impact when we walk. And so what we need to do is try to work on getting that connection, that tucking under on the side that's going to be rooted to correct that anterior pelvic tilt. Now, if people have had it for a long period of time, that could be associated with the hip flexors becoming very tight, and then it can be very difficult to just simply tuck the pelvis under because the hip flexors are not loose enough to get into that position. So sometimes it's going to be helpful to do exercises to work on stretching those muscles out and strengthening them to be able to get them into the proper position. The yoga cow and cat poses are very common exercises recommended to help stretch the lumbar spine muscles and those hip muscles so they can get into the right position. What happens when people have an anterior pelvic tilt and some other types of walking problems is that we're focusing, instead of rooting with the lower abs, we're focusing on using the glutes. I'm talking about the glute max in the back. You see so many people talking about having to push off using the glutes. And it's because they're correctly thinking something has to be pushing off the ground, right? We can't just float forward. I talk a lot about pulling forward with the hip flexors and not pushing with the glutes. But if that's the case, that we're pulling forward, what is it that's pushing off the ground? Because just physics would tell us something has to be moving backwards against the ground to help move us forward. And that is going to be that lower ab action. If we think about the lower abs, like I described before, turning backwards against the ground as we're moving forwards, that lower ab action is what is moving the body and what is pushing off the ground like that. It's not the glutes pushing like that. So people who have an anterior pelvic tilt are often using the glutes too much to push against the ground, which is going to lock the knees out. And so they're pushing and pushing and pushing using the glutes, not using the lower abs. When people do that, their knees are going to be locked out because they don't have the lower ab action. So if that's one of your problems, you have to try to work on softening those knees and feeling the rotation of the lower abs. You can do some hip circles like this, a little figure 8, which is going to get some of that mobility in the lower abs and also help connect it to what the upper abs are doing. So you can move more fluidly and you can feel the connection going from one leg to the other leg and back and forth. It's a good exercise to do in addition to a static stretch like the cow and cat pose. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to be subscribed to the channel so you can see all of my other videos that come out. Go back through my old catalog of videos. A lot of people ask me questions that I've answered in many previous videos. So I really encourage you to leave comments, ask me questions, but as you're doing that, go back through all the other videos because there's so much content in there that's going to help you with your movement. I'm sure you're going to find what you're looking for in one of those videos, and you can't watch too many of them, in my opinion. I hope you have a great day.